Yes, there have been 1 or 2 cases of sodomy at the welfare homes. Datuk Nasiruddin Mohd Ali, CEO of Global Ikhwan, Facebook Live, September 14th, 2024. That was not a whistleblower. That was not a police officer. That was the CEO himself. And before that confession, you trusted him. You knew them. Even if you didn't know their name, you knew their bread. You bought their roti from the bakery at the corner of your taman. You ate their nasi at the restaurant near your office. The one that was always clean, always halal certified, always staffed by quiet young men in Copia who never caused trouble. Maybe you bought their herbal products, their groceries. Maybe you sent your child to a weekend religious class associated with their welfare home because it seemed, well, it seemed pious. Global Ikhwan Services and Business Holdings, GISBH. By 2024, they were operating 415 business outlets across 20 countries. Annual revenue of 187 million ringgit. Assets worth 325 million ringgit. Restaurants in London and Paris. A hotel in Sarajevo. A 120-acre estate in Perth, Australia. A genuine multinational empire, built entirely on the idea that you could trust them because they were Muslim-run, morally upright, dedicated to caring for orphans and the poor. They were, by every outward measure, a success story. And in the welfare homes behind that success, in dormitories smelling of mildew and fear, in saraos that were supposed to be places of prayer, children were being abused. Not 1 or 2 children, 625, between the ages of 2 and 28. This is the story of how it happened, how it was allowed to happen, and why it took so long for anyone to stop it. To understand GISBH, you must go back, way back, to 1968, to a young religious teacher named Ashaari Muhammad, who had a dream, and then told his followers it was sent directly by the Prophet Muhammad himself. Ashaari was, by many accounts, a compelling and charismatic man. He had been a government-trained religious teacher, a member of PAS, a student of Islamic scholarship. But he grew disillusioned. He felt that Malaysian Islam had become shallow, political when it should be spiritual, corrupt when it should be pure. So, in 1968, he gathered a small circle, 10 to 12 people, in a house in Kampung Datuk Keramat, Kuala Lumpur. They called themselves Kumpulan Rumah Putih, the White House Group. Later, they would be renamed after a companion of the Prophet, Al-Arqam. The idea was beautiful in its simplicity. Build a community. Live by Islamic values, not just in words but in every breath. In what you eat, what you wear, how you build your economy, how you raise your children. Withdraw from a corrupt world and build something purer inside it. By the 1970s, they had established a commune in Sungai Penchala, Selangor. Members moved in, worked the land, ran businesses, educated their children in Al-Arqam schools. No salaries, just a living allowance based on need. A socialist Islamic utopia, of sorts. By the 1980s, tens of thousands of followers had joined. Not just poor, uneducated villagers, but urban professionals, graduates, doctors, engineers. People who were hungry for something that felt authentic. Al-Arqam, at its peak, ran 52 grocery stores, 20 mini-markets, 18 restaurants, 56 factories. It was one of the most economically powerful Islamic movements Malaysia had ever seen. But Ashaari's claims were growing bolder. He began to tell followers that he received visions, dreams sent directly from the Prophet Muhammad, that he was the prophesied Putera Bani Tamim, destined to assist the Imam Mahdi in establishing a just Islamic world order, that the Imam Mahdi himself, a figure from Islamic eschatology, believed to appear at the end of times, was a long-dead Sufi sheikh whose teachings Ashaari had revived. He told followers he could communicate with the dead, that he could forgive sins, a power Muslims believe belongs only to God. Followers were told to practice the Arad Muhammadiyah, a set of spiritual exercises whose continued recitation would infuse them with supernatural power. He was already, by orthodox Islamic standards, preaching heresy. Then he went further. He suggested that if God willed it, he would be willing to become Prime Minister of Malaysia. That was when the government decided it had heard enough. In August 1994, Al-Arqam was officially banned. In September, Ashaari Muhammad was arrested in Thailand and returned to Malaysia, where he was detained under the Internal Security Act. Under detention, he publicly renounced his views. The movement was over. Except it wasn't. When a cult loses its leader, two things can happen. It collapses, or it transforms. Al-Arqam transformed. The followers did not scatter. The true believers, the ones who had grown up inside the communes, whose entire world was Al-Arqam, who had no other community, no other identity. They held on. And when their leader was taken, they found other ways to keep the flame burning. In 1997, 3 years after the ban, a new organization was quietly incorporated. It was called Rufaqa Corporation. It was run by people loyal to Ashaari, including, critically, members of his own family. The religious teachings were gone, at least officially. What remained was the economic infrastructure, the communal living structure, the hierarchy of absolute obedience, and, underground, the ideology. When Malaysian authorities banned Rufaqa Corporation in 2006, the organization simply changed its name again. Global Ikhwan, then GISBH. Each ban, each crackdown, each name change, none of them touched the core. The same people, the same structure, the same beliefs, now practiced in secret, buried in rivers, locked behind closed doors. An ex-member, speaking anonymously, described what the transition felt like from the inside. By the end, there were no more studies, no Fardu Ain, no proper religious lectures. It became all about collecting money. The followers were left struggling. From a young age, they had to live in charitable homes. Teenagers had to work without pay, and even adults had no salary. The ideology had been hollowed out. What remained was the control. And into that control, that infrastructure of obedience, that apparatus of silence, children were being placed. Here is a question that should keep you awake at night. GISBH operated dozens of welfare homes across Malaysia. These homes were registered and monitored, in theory, by the relevant state welfare departments. They cared for what GISBH described as orphans and children from disadvantaged backgrounds. The public donated to these homes. Community members saw the children at their restaurants, working quietly, saying little. Some noticed that the boys doing odd jobs at the bakery seemed very young, but they told themselves the children must be learning a trade, gaining religious education, being cared for. When police raided those homes in September 2024, they found over 600 children. Many of these children had spent their entire lives, from infancy, through childhood, through adolescence, entirely within GISBH facilities. They had never gone to a government school, never played in a normal playground, never had unsupervised contact with the outside world. And here is the detail that breaks you. Many of them were not orphans at all. Their parents were GISBH members. One investigation revealed a member with 4 wives and 34 children, but only 2 of the children lived with him. The others had been handed over to the welfare homes as infants. When authorities questioned some of these parents, when they were told their children had been found, that they could be reunited, some denied the children were theirs. Think about that. A parent denying their own child. This is what total ideological control looks like. This is what happens when a movement trains people to surrender not just their labor, their money, their time, but their own flesh and blood, in the name of God. The children grew up inside a completely sealed world. They watched GISBH's own television channel, Ikhwan TV. They received news only through their leaders. Cell phones were forbidden. Outside contact was forbidden. They were not raised. They were manufactured. Manufactured to be loyal, to be obedient, to work without pay, and, as police would discover, to be used. On September 11th, 2024, the Royal Malaysia Police launched Operation Global, Op Global, with simultaneous raids on 20 welfare homes linked to GISBH in Selangor and Negeri Sembilan. What they found broke officers who had seen everything. Children suffering from physical abuse, signs of child labor, teenagers forced to work in bakeries, restaurants, laundromats, without pay, without rest. 13 children initially suspected of having been sodomized. The number would grow as investigations deepened. The Inspector General of Police, Tan Sri Razaruddin Hussain, made the announcement that stopped the country cold. Children at these homes had been sexually abused. And more than that, some children had been taught to sexually assault other children. 3 days after the raids, on September 14th, GISBH's own CEO stepped in front of a camera. Datuk Nasiruddin Mohad Ali went on Facebook Live. He did not deny everything. He confirmed it. Yes, he said, there have been 1 or 2 cases of sodomy at the welfare homes. He then asked, live, on camera, in a video that would be shared millions of times, whether advice could be given instead of legal action. Advice for sodomizing children. The nation's reaction was a fury so unified it was almost unfamiliar. the Sultan of Selangor issued a public statement saying he was shocked and disappointed. He called out religious agencies by name and said the delay in handling the issue reflects a weakness in monitoring and enforcement. The Prime Minister called for a rapid investigation. The raids spread from Selangor and Negeri Sembilan outward across the whole peninsula. Kelantan, Pahang, Perak, Terengganu, Malacca, Kedah, state after state. In Kelantan, police raided the CEO's own family home in Kampung Panji, Kota Baru. Inside, they found more than 30 people, including his second wife and over 20 children. They found documents and books linked to Al-Arqam's outlawed teachings. Some had been buried in the ground near the riverbank. Others had reportedly been burned in the hours after the CEO's arrest was announced. Someone had known the raid was coming. Someone had been warned. When the raids expanded, investigators found something that shifted the story from a child abuse scandal into something far older and stranger. In the raided premises, homes, offices, storerooms, police found hundreds of books and pamphlets, photographs of Ashaari Muhammad, some framed, some laminated, some buried in mud at the river's edge like relics, logos and banners associated with Al-Arqam's banned teachings, the paraphernalia of a movement that, officially, had been dead for 30 years. In Malacca alone, 12 photographs of Ashaari were recovered. In Penang, 6 Al-Arqam books, some explicitly outlawed by the Ministry of Home Affairs in 2011. JAKIM was handed 455 pamphlets and related materials. Also seized, strands of beard. This detail requires explanation. Former GISBH members described a practice that had persisted from the Al-Arqam era. The belief that Ashaari's physical presence carried a kind of spiritual power. His hair, his bathwater, were believed to carry blessings. This holy water, infused with the leader's hair, was reportedly sprayed on goods produced in their factories, on meals served to diners in their restaurants. The bread you bought from Ikhwan bakery, the nasi from their restaurant. It may have been sprayed with the bathwater of a man whose teachings had been declared deviant by Malaysia's own religious authorities. The Peerless Mufti, Datuk Dr. Maud Azri Zainul Abidin, explained what the investigation had found. Members venerated their leaders to the point of equating them with prophets. They attribute their leaders with the power to perform miracles and claim they possess knowledge of the unseen. This was not a welfare organization with a few bad employees. This was a banned cult, alive, practicing, and growing, right under our noses. Here is what made GISBH different from every cult that came before it. They did not ask you to join them. They just asked you to buy their bread. Most cults survive on the loyalty of their members alone. GISBH built something far more sophisticated. A business empire that extracted money from the general public, without the public ever knowing they were funding a deviant movement. The key was the Buy Muslim First culture. In a Malaysia where economic solidarity with Muslim and Bumi Putera businesses had become almost a religious obligation, where boycotting a non-Muslim brand was treated as an act of faith, GISBH was perfectly positioned. Their branding was impeccable. Clean shops, friendly staff, halal signage everywhere. The kind of business you felt good about supporting. To question them was to be suspected of attacking Islam itself. So nobody questioned them. Not the customers who noticed the staff seemed unusually young and unusually silent. Not the business owners who noticed the workers never complained, never asked for raises, never left. Not the community leaders who drove past the welfare homes every Friday on their way to prayers. GISBH had not just built a business, they had built a shield. And that shield was made entirely from the trust and identity of the community around them. They weaponized your faith, and they used it to hide everything. Now let us talk about where the money actually came from, and where it went. GISBH had 3 sources of income. All 3 involved taking from people who trusted them. The first was donations. GISBH ran its welfare homes as registered charities. They collected donations openly, at restaurant counters, through online campaigns, at mosques, through corporate sponsorships. Zakat contributions flowed in through channels that were never properly audited. Malaysians gave generously, as they always do when children are involved, and Islam is invoked. Every donation campaign featured children, smiling faces, grateful orphans, the image of piety doing its work in the world. Those children were not the beneficiaries of the donations. Those children were the tool used to generate the donations. The second source was labor, or more accurately, the absence of wages. Members of GISBH worked in bakeries, restaurants, factories, and farms in exchange for what the organization called spiritual rewards. Food, shelter, the promise of God's blessing. No salary, no EPF, no legal employment contract. Adults who had devoted decades to the movement had nothing to show for it. No savings, no property, no pension, because everything they produced fed directly into the organization's revenue. 187 million ringgit a year, built on labor that cost them almost nothing. The third source was customers. You paid full market price for bread made by workers who received no wages. The gap between what you paid and what those workers earned, multiplied across 415 outlets, across 27 years, is where the fortune was built. And there is one more layer to this fraud. Leaders allegedly ran a cult-like organization that forced followers to work and have many children, some allegedly conceived through rape, to populate the orphanages and raise donations that funded their lavish lifestyles. So now the question, where did the money go? When police moved in, the answer came into view piece by piece. Police froze 153 bank accounts worth 882,795 ringgit. They seized 22 motor cars of various types, 14 land parcels, 90 mobile phones, 16 computers, 13 vehicles, 2 necklaces, and over 18,000 ringgit in cash. Among the animals seized, 9 horses, 14 rabbits, and 3 peacocks. Horses, peacocks, jewelry, luxury vehicles. This is what 187 million ringgit in annual revenue, built on donations meant for orphans, on labor given for free, on customers who thought they were buying halal bread, looked like when it reached the top. And there is one final detail that makes this a fraud on top of a fraud. GISBH's bread products had not renewed their halal certification since 2017. For 7 years, they sold products marketed as halal to customers who chose them specifically because of that halal status. In a country where halal compliance is a matter of sincere religious obligation, this was not a paperwork error. This was a deliberate lie aimed directly at the faith of their own customers. The followers lived in compounds. The children lived in welfare homes. The leadership kept horses and peacocks and jewelry and cars. That silence around their finances was not accidental. That silence was the business model. This number deserves its own chapter. 49. Between 2011 and 2024, 49 reports about abuse, neglect, and suspicious activity at GISBH-linked welfare homes were filed with authorities. That is more than 3 reports every single year, for 13 consecutive years. Each report represented someone who overcame real fear. A former member, a concerned neighbor, a child who had escaped, a parent who had woken up, to tell someone in authority, something is very wrong here. 49 times. Nothing happened. Why? Some answers lie in the structure of Malaysian religious governance. JAKIM, state religious councils, welfare departments, and police all share overlapping jurisdiction over welfare homes. In practice, that overlap created gaps, and GISBH slipped through those gaps for over a decade. Some answers lie in GISBH's careful cultivation of political and diplomatic relationships. Their CEO spoke openly of maintaining contact with ambassadors and assisting embassies. Their products had reached Saudi Arabia. Institutions that might have investigated found reasons not to look too closely. And some answers lie in a culture where questioning anything done in the name of religion carries a price. Social, professional, sometimes legal. The 49 people who filed reports paid that price. They were ignored, dismissed, or quietly discouraged from pushing further. The Sultan of Selangor said religious agencies had been merely good at talking, but with no results. 49 families already knew that. 625 children already knew that. On September 18th, 2024, 1 week after Op Global began, 2 motorhomes were spotted at the Bukit Kayu Hitam immigration checkpoint at the Thai border. The vehicles carried GISBH logos. Inside were 5 people, including the son of a GISBH leader. GISBH's official explanation was routine paperwork, renewing international circulation permits for vehicles that crossed borders regularly. The Kedah Criminal Investigation Department did not accept that explanation. The vehicles were intercepted before they crossed. The motorhomes were seized. The passengers were detained. Whether this was an escape attempt will be decided by the courts. But consider the context. This happened 7 days into the largest police operation ever launched against the organization. Arrests were mounting across the country. Documents were being seized. The CEO had already gone on Facebook Live and confirmed the abuse. Someone was trying to get out. By October 23, 2024, 415 people had been arrested. 60 were held under SOSMA, the Security Offenses Special Measures Act, typically reserved for terrorism and organized crime. GISBH's CEO, Nasiruddin Mohad Ali, his wife, and 2 children were among those remanded. His lawyer said the group planned to fight the charges. Outside the courthouse, his former followers were beginning the long, disorienting process of re-entering a world they had spent their entire lives being told to fear. There is a particular cruelty specific to children raised inside total institutions. It is not just what was done to them. It is what they were never given. They were never given the ordinary chaos of a normal childhood. The arguments with parents, the unsupervised afternoons, the boredom that teaches you who you are when nobody is watching. They were given a world where every moment was structured, every thought was monitored, every relationship was controlled. When police came and the doors were opened in September 2024, the children did not necessarily feel rescued. Many had never known anything else. Health screening of 392 rescued children found evidence of physical abuse and child labor exploitation. But the psychological damage runs far deeper than any medical screening can capture. These are children who were taught that the outside world was dangerous and corrupt, that their leaders were divinely chosen, that obedience was the highest form of worship, that the parents who handed them over were doing something loving. To undo that takes more than a rescue operation. It takes years of skilled psychological care. It takes communities willing to welcome people who may struggle to function in ordinary life. It takes a country willing to accept its share of responsibility for what happened. The question of what becomes of these children is not a footnote. It is the only question that matters now. GISBH did not survive for 27 years on cunning alone. It survived because of silence. And that silence had many authors. There was the silence of institutions, the welfare departments that registered the homes without looking inside them, the religious agencies that received the reports and filed them away, the enforcement bodies that found reasons to defer, delay, and defer again. There was the silence of the community, the neighbors who noticed things that seemed strange and told themselves it was not their place to interfere, the customers who felt vaguely uneasy but kept buying the bread, the leaders who heard whispers and chose not to follow them. And there was the silence enforced by culture, the unspoken rule in Malaysian society that institutions wearing the name of Islam deserve a longer leash, more benefit of the doubt, more protection from scrutiny than others. The rule that says questioning a Muslim charity makes you the problem, not the charity. GISBH understood that rule perfectly. They built their entire operation on it. What this story leaves us with is not just anger at the people who committed these crimes. It is a harder, more uncomfortable question. What kind of society makes this possible? What do we need to change? Not in our laws alone, but in ourselves, so that the next organization that hides behind God cannot do so for another 27 years? That is not a question about GISBH. That is a question about all of us. The bakeries are closed now. The logos have been stripped from the walls. The social media accounts, the ones that posted Quran verses alongside advertisements for their bread, are dark. In towns across Malaysia, neighbors stand outside shuttered storefronts and say the same thing. I never knew. I went there every week. It seemed so normal. In courts across the country, charges are being read. Human trafficking, sexual assault, organized crime. The defendants sit in the dock. Some of them people who genuinely believed they were serving God, and some of them people who knew exactly what they were doing. 625 children are somewhere in the care system, or back with families, or in some cases, with parents who are themselves part of the investigation. The trials will take years. The healing will take longer. Ashaari Muhammad died in 2010 in a hospital in Ipoh, after a decade under house arrest. He did not live to see what became of the movement he built. Some of his remaining followers believe he foresaw it all. That the raids, the arrests, the charges are just another test. Another proof of righteousness. Another chapter in a divine plan. This is the final, most insidious legacy of any cult. The ability to absorb every piece of evidence against it and turn it into further proof of its own story. To the children of GISBH, this documentary does not offer you resolution. It offers only the truth, assembled as carefully as it can be from the outside looking in. You were not orphans in need of salvation. You were children who deserved the ordinary miracle of a safe childhood. You still do. When we were inside, we were happy, because we were indoctrinated with those beliefs. If you or someone you know was affected by GISBH or any organization linked to Al-Arqam, reach out to Talian Kasi, 15999, UNICEF Malaysia Child Helpline, 180018.